Ever get the feeling that not all revenue is, created equal?
Hmm.
That's what we're diving into today
Okay.
on the deep dive. The idea that some customers are actually costing you money,
Yeah.
even though they're bringing in revenue. I'm Ron.
And I'm Nova.
And today we're talking about a powerful tool that can help you as a sales leader
Right.
figure this out. Customer Profitability Analysis,
Right.
or, CPA.
CPA, yeah. It's a game changer for sales and revenue leaders because it lets you see beyond just that top line revenue number. It helps you actually figure out who your most profitable customers are and which ones might be secretly sort of eating into your profits.
So let's start off, with the basics. What exactly is CPA,
Mhm.
and how does it work?
So CPA essentially evaluates the profit that you generate from each individual customer or even a segment of customers. And it does this by looking at the revenue that that customer generates, but also all the costs that are associated with serving that customer.
Okay, so we're talking about like the real nitty-gritty of doing business with each customer.
Yeah,
What are we really spending
exactly.
to get them and keep them?
Yeah.
Can you give us that core formula that sums this all up?
Yeah. So the core formula is actually very simple. It's basically customer profitability equals the revenue that you get from a customer minus their direct costs and their indirect costs.
Okay, so we're talking about direct costs, indirect costs.
Mhm.
Let's break those down a little bit. Direct costs in a B2B context, what are those?
So direct costs are the costs that are directly attributable to serving a specific customer. So for example, think about your customer acquisition cost. That very first sale, all the work that went into it, it might have involved, your sales team spending hours crafting a very specific proposal, or maybe you had to do a pilot program for that customer
Yeah,
specifically.
lots of back and forth.
Lots of meetings, maybe even travel involved.
Travel, yeah,
So that would all be a direct cost because it's directly tied to getting that customer.
that makes sense. What else? What other kind of costs are we talking about?
Then you have the cost of actually delivering the product or service to that customer. So this could include things like onboarding costs, implementation costs, any kind of support costs that are specific to that customer. And also, if you're developing custom features for them, let's say they're a large customer and they request a very specific feature, all that development time is also going to be a direct cost.
So we're talking about not just acquiring the customer, but then actually keeping them happy,
Yeah,
making sure they're successful.
exactly. Keeping them on board.
That's all a direct cost.
And then if you have dedicated resources, so for example, maybe you have a whole team that's dedicated to this one very large customer, all the costs associated with that team, their salaries, their benefits, all that's going to be a direct cost for that customer.
I see. So it's like a team or specific tools
Right. Yeah.
dedicated just for them. Okay,
Exactly. Dedicated just to that one specific client.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's talk about indirect costs now. That seems a little bit more nebulous. So what falls under that?
Yeah. Indirect costs are a little bit trickier because they're not directly attributable to any one customer. It's more about the overall costs of running your business. So, for example, think about your marketing campaigns, your advertising, your content marketing, your webinars. It's really hard to say how much of that spend is directly related to acquiring one specific customer.
Right, because it's like casting a wide net, right?
Exactly.
You don't know who's going to bite.
Right. It's all about generating leads, but it's very general. So that would be an indirect cost.
Okay.
Same with your technical infrastructure. You've got your cloud hosting costs, your software licenses, things like that. Again, really hard to tie that back to one customer.
Right. It's like the backbone of your business that everyone needs to run on.
Exactly, exactly. And then you have things like your general corporate overheads, which include executive salaries, your HR costs, your rent, utilities, all that. Again, these are costs that apply to the entire business, not just one customer. And then finally, things like your general customer service platform. So for example, your help desk software or your knowledge base that all customers have access to. That's also an indirect cost.
I see. Okay, so it's basically everything you need to be a functioning business,
Right.
but not tied to any one customer.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, to make this a little bit more tangible for everyone, can you walk us through like a practical example?
Absolutely. So let's say you're a SaaS company
Yeah.
and you have a customer that's paying you $10,000 per year.
Okay.
Okay, now let's look at the costs. So the direct costs for this customer might include, let's say, $1,000 in onboarding costs,
Okay.
$500 in support tickets,
Okay.
and maybe $600 for their specific hosting infrastructure because they need a certain amount of storage. So that totals $2,100 in direct costs for this customer.
So $10,000 in revenue, $2,100 in direct costs.
Exactly.
And how do we calculate the indirect costs for this particular customer?
So for indirect costs, we have to do a little bit of allocation. So let's say this company spends $50,000 on sales and marketing in total, and they have 1,000 customers.
Okay,
So we could allocate $50 of that to this particular customer.
I see. Okay.
They spend $200,000 on product development, and they have 2,000 customers.
Okay.
So we can allocate $100 to this customer for product development. General administration costs are $100,000.
Okay.
And they have 1,000 customers. So that's another $100.
Yeah.
And then customer success costs $30,000 for the company, and they have 1,000 customers. So that's $30 for this particular customer.
Got it. So we've got all these indirect costs.
Exactly.
Total them up.
Total them up. We have $280 in indirect costs for this one customer.
Okay, so 280.
Mm.
And now how do we determine the actual profitability of this particular customer?
So now we can use that formula that we talked about earlier. So we take the revenue, which is $10,000, we subtract the direct costs, which is $2,100, and then we subtract the indirect costs, which is $280, and that leaves us with a customer profitability of $7,620.
Wow. So they're actually bringing in a lot less
Yeah.
than that initial $10,000.
Yeah, it's pretty eye-opening, isn't it? You see that $10,000 come in, you're thinking, okay, this customer is great, but once you factor in all the costs associated with serving them,
Right.
it's actually quite a bit lower.
You realize they're not quite the rock star you thought they were.
Exactly. And that's why CPA is so important, because it gives you that full picture.
So, I mean, why should sales leaders really be focusing on CPA? Like, what are the immediate benefits they can expect to see?
Well, the biggest benefit is that it allows you to identify your most profitable customers. Right. Like we were just saying, not all revenue is created equal. So if you know who your most profitable customers are, you can focus your efforts on them. You can give them more attention, you can tailor your sales and marketing efforts towards them, and you can really make sure that they're happy and that they stay with you for a long time.
So it's not just about spreading your resources thin across everyone.
Exactly.
It's about really focusing in on those key players.
It's about prioritizing. It's about figuring out who's really driving your business forward and investing in those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. What's another kind of key benefit that sales leaders can expect?
Another really big benefit is improved cost management. So when you understand the cost associated with each customer, you can start to identify areas where you might be overspending. So for example, maybe you realize that a certain type of customer is consistently more expensive to serve. And maybe those customers aren't even that profitable. So then you can start to think about, okay, what can we do about this?
Yeah.
Can we change our pricing for that customer segment? Can we adjust our service model? Can we maybe automate some of the things that we're doing manually? It really helps you to optimize your spending and make sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly.
What are some of the key metrics that CPA helps to uncover?
So one really important metric that CPA helps you uncover is customer lifetime value, or CLV. And this is a prediction of the total revenue that a customer will generate for your business over the entire relationship.
Over the entire relationship. Exactly. So it's not just about how much they spend in the first year, it's about how much they spend over the lifetime of their relationship with you. And you can calculate CLV by taking the average revenue per customer per year and multiplying it by the average customer lifespan. So, for example, if your average customer spends $10,000 per year and they stay with you for 5 years, then their CLV is $50,000. And understanding CLV is really important because it can help you to justify your customer acquisition costs.
I see. So if you know a customer is going to stick around
Yeah.
and ultimately be really valuable,
Yeah.
you might be willing to spend more
Exactly.
to acquire them in the beginning.
You might be willing to invest a little bit more up front. You might be willing to take a bit of a hit on that initial sale because you know that they're going to be worth it in the long run.
Yeah, you're playing the long game.
Exactly. Exactly.
Are there any other key metrics that are kind of important to uncover from this analysis?
Yeah. Another really important metric is cost to serve, or CTS. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but this is basically the cost of servicing a particular customer, both in terms of direct costs and indirect costs. And understanding your CTS is really important because it can help you to identify customers that are unprofitable. Right. So maybe you have a customer that's generating a decent amount of revenue, but the cost to serve them is so high that you're actually losing money on them.
Wow.
And that happens more often than you think.
Really?
Yeah, because sometimes you have customers that are very demanding.
Right.
They need a lot of support, they need a lot of hand-holding, they might have very specific needs, and all of that costs money. So it's really important to understand your CTS so you can identify those customers and then figure out what to do about them. Do you need to raise your prices for those customers? Do you need to adjust your service model? Or maybe you just need to let them go.
I see. So you're saying it's not always about cutting off those relationships.
Right.
Sometimes it's about maybe charging them more or just being aware
Yeah,
that it's not as lucrative as you might think.
exactly. It's about making informed decisions.
Yeah. So for a sales leader that's listening to this and thinking, okay, this all makes sense, what's like the first step they should take? Like tomorrow morning, what can they do?
Yeah. So the first step is to start collecting data. And this data might already exist in your CRM system.
Okay.
You probably have data on your customers, their revenue, their interactions with your company, but you might need to start tracking some additional things like the time that your sales team is spending with each customer or the number of support tickets that they're generating. And once you have that data, you can start to build a simple spreadsheet or you can use a more sophisticated tool to start analyzing your customer profitability.
So it's all about kind of just getting that information together,
Right.
even if it's just kind of like a rough estimate to begin with,
Yeah.
just to get a sense.
Just to get a baseline. You don't have to be perfect at first. It's more about just starting to track this information and seeing what kind of insights you can glean from it.
Absolutely. Um, any final words of wisdom for sales leaders that are kind of thinking about diving into CPA?
Yeah. I would just say don't be afraid to get started. It might seem a little bit daunting at first, but it's really not that complicated. And the insights that you can gain from CPI are so valuable. It can really help you to transform your sales strategy and to drive profitable growth for your business.
So it's about working smarter, not harder,
Exactly.
figuring out who those key players are,
Exactly.
and then investing your resources wisely.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the deep dive today, Nova.
Thanks for having me.
And for you listening out there, we hope you found this insightful and actionable. Think about what is that first step you can take tomorrow morning to get a better understanding of your customer profitability. Every journey starts with that first step. Until next time, thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.